Imagine if the most iconic image in human history was a lie. What if the face of Jesus Christ, often portrayed with fair skin and European features, wasn't the person depicted in paintings, stained glass windows, or Hollywood films? What if the truth buried under layers of cultural and theological reshaping was more complex, more diverse, and undeniably African? This isn't about rewriting history for shock value. It's about peeling back the layers of myth and misconception to uncover a truth that has profound implications for faith identity. In justice today, for centuries, the face of Jesus has been portrayed through a European lens, but the historical, geographical, and cultural evidence tells a very different story. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. A journey that challenges what we think we know about the Savior, his identity and his relevance in a world still grappling with issues of race and representation. To understand the roots of this untold story, must first place Jesus in his historical and geographical context. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a small town in 1st century Roman Judea, a region at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. This location is far from incidental. It situates Jesus in a melting pot of cultures, ethnicities, and histories. The ancient world wasn't neatly divided by the racial categories we recognize today. Instead, it was a dynamic tapestry of peoples moving across regions due to trade migration and conquest. In this context, understanding Jesus' identity requires us to think beyond modern racial constructs and acknowledge the diversity of his world. When we delve deeper into the Gospels, we uncover striking connections between Jesus and Africa. Take, for example, the story of the Holy Family's flight to Egypt. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Mary, Joseph, and the infant Jesus fled to Egypt to escape King Herod's murderous decree. This wasn't a brief layover. It's believed that Jesus' family lived in Egypt for several formative years, blending into the local, predominantly African population. Egypt wasn't just a random hideout for the Holy Family. It had long been a place of refuge for Jewish communities from the time of the patriarchs to the Babylonian exile. Africa played a vital role in the spiritual and historical narrative of the Jewish people. For Jesus, these early years in Egypt weren't merely about survival. They were formative in shaping his understanding of the world, exposing him to African culture, traditions, and communities. This African chapter in Jesus' life is more than a historical footnote. It symbolizes Africa's central role in the story of salvation, a role often overlooked in traditional narratives. The continent that sheltered Israel during times of famine and hardship also provided sanctuary for the Messiah. This African connection isn't about token representation. It's a profound truth woven into the fabric of Jesus' life and ministry. Now, let's shift our focus to how Jesus has been depicted throughout history in the earliest centuries of Christianity. Jesus' image reflected the diverse communities that embraced his teachings. Early Christian art in Egypt, Ethiopia, and other parts of Africa portrayed Jesus with dark skin, woolly hair, and features that resonate with African identity. These depictions weren't accidental. They reflected the understanding of Jesus' heritage held by some of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Contrast this with the image of Jesus that dominates much of Western Christianity. Today, a fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure that owes more to Renaissance aesthetics than historical accuracy. The transformation of Jesus' image from a man rooted in the Middle Eastern and African context to a European icon is a story of power politics and cultural dominance, a story we'll unravel as we move forward. Why is it so important to reclaim this forgotten narrative for people of African descent? The image of a black Jesus isn't just about historical accuracy. It's a profound act of reclaiming identity and dignity within a faith that has often been weaponized to marginalize them. It challenges the narrative that whiteness is closer to godliness and affirms that African features, culture, and heritage are integral to the story of salvation. But this isn't just about representation for one group. For all of us, embracing the African roots of Jesus invites us to confront our biases, expand our understanding of history, and reimagine a faith that truly reflects the diversity of human experience. It's a call to see Jesus not as a figure confined by cultural stereotypes, but as someone who transcends them, a savior for all people. As we journey further into this untold story, we'll explore the evidence that supports Jesus' African heritage, uncover how his image was whitewashed over centuries, and delve into the profound implications of reclaiming this narrative for our modern world. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a transformative exploration of faith, identity, and justice. Stay with me as we peel back the layers of history to uncover the real story of Jesus, a story that has been waiting for centuries to be told. The evidence of Jesus' African heritage lies not just in the pages of Scripture, but in the very geography and culture of the world he inhabited. To understand this, we must look closer at the cultural crossroads of first-century Judea, where Jesus' life unfolded. This land, nestled between Africa, Asia, and Europe, was a vibrant intersection of civilizations, where ethnic diversity was not merely a possibility, but a reality. Bethlehem and Nazareth, the towns where Jesus was born and raised, were part of Roman-occupied Judea, a region shaped by trade, migration, and conquest. The people of this area were a mosaic of ethnicities with complex ancestries reflected in their physical features, traditions, and customs. This was not a homogeneous society, but one where identities interwove through shared experiences. One compelling piece of evidence for Jesus' African connection is his family's flight to Egypt, as described in the Gospel of Matthew, fleeing King Herod's wrath. Mary, Joseph, and the infant, Jesus sought refuge in Egypt, a land that had long been a sanctuary for Jewish exiles. The fact that the Holy Family could flee to Egypt and integrate into its society suggests they were not so visually distinct from the local population in a region where darker skin tones were common. This ability to blend and underscores their connection to Africa's rich cultural and ethnic diversity. The time Jesus spent in Egypt was not merely a moment of survival, but a formative experience picture. The young Jesus, walking through the streets of Egyptian cities, hearing its languages, and absorbing its traditions. These early years exposed him to a diversity of culture and belief that would influence his teachings and ministry. His experiences were not limited to one culture, but encompassed a breadth of perspectives that reflected the interconnectedness of Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. The African connection is further evidenced in the Gospel accounts of Simon of Cyrene, the man compelled to carry Jesus' cross. Cyrene, located in what is now Libya, was a North African city with a significant Jewish population. Simon's presence in Jerusalem and his pivotal role in the Passion narrative highlight the historical ties between African and Jewish communities. Africans were not peripheral to the story of Christianity. They were integral participants, shaping its early moments and bearing witness to its most profound events. Early Christian art provides additional clues to Jesus' heritage in regions like Egypt and Ethiopia. Some of the oldest surviving depictions of Jesus show him with dark skin, woolly hair, and features distinctly aligned with African identity. These were not accidental choices. They reflected how early Christians, particularly in Africa, understood Jesus' appearance. The Coptic Christians of Egypt have long preserved traditions of portraying Jesus with features that mirror their own, not as an act of projection, but as a reflection of their belief in his heritage, the Ethiop. Ian Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, offers another testament to this connection. Christianity arrived in Ethiopia in the 4th century, and Ethiopian iconography has consistently depicted Jesus with African features. This tradition has persisted for nearly 2 millennia, unaltered by the European influences that would later reshape Christianity elsewhere. These depictions are not modern reinterpretations. They are deeply rooted in how these communities have understood Jesus since the earliest days of their faith. Descriptions of Jesus in early Christian texts, though scarce, also lend themselves to this perspective. The book of Revelation describes Jesus with hair like wool and feet like bronze glowing in a furnace. Well, these descriptions are symbolic. They align more closely with African and Middle Eastern features than with the European representations that came to dominate Renaissance art. The imagery evokes a figure deeply connected to the earth and humanity, one whose physical presence reflected the diversity of his surroundings. Archaeological findings further challenged the monolithic portrayals of Jesus that emerged in later centuries. Skeletal remains, ancient artifacts, and historical records reveal a Judean population characterized by a wide range of physical traits, shaped by centuries of migration and cultural exchange. This diversity underscores the likelihood that Jesus, as a man of his time and place, would have embodied the rich ethnic complexity of his homeland. Beyond physical appearance, Jesus' African heritage is reflected in the themes and values of his teachings. His emphasis on community, the dignity of the marginalized, and the interconnectedness of all people resonates deeply with African spiritual traditions. These traditions often prioritize communal harmony and the recognition of Hum's shared essence, echoing the core principles of Jesus' message. It is as though the cultural influences of Africa found expression in his universal teachings, recognizing Jesus' African heritage and riches, our understanding of his identity, and challenges us to see him as a figure who transcended the boundaries of his time. The image of a black Jesus is not about exclusivity or allure, but about inclusivity, acknowledging the fullness of his humanity and the multicultural roots of the Christian faith. This perspective invites a deeper appreciation of Jesus' role as a bridge between diverse peoples and a unifying figure whose message speaks to all the journey of understanding. Jesus' African heritage is inseparable from the story of how his image was reshaped for centuries. This transformation did not happen by chance. It was the result of deliberate choices made by those in positions of power seeking to align the image of Jesus with their own cultural and political agendas. The portrayal of Jesus as a European figure emerged gradually, reflecting the priorities of empires, rulers, and institutions, rather than the historical and geographical realities of his life. In the earliest days of Christianity, there was no consistent depiction of Jesus. Early Christian communities focused more on symbols such as the fish or the shepherd to represent Christ. This symbolic approach was partly influenced by Jewish traditions that prohibited graven images, and partly by the desire to emphasize Jesus' teachings and resurrection over his physical form for these communities. The exact appearance of Jesus was less important than the message he carried. The turning point came with the conversion of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. Constantine's embrace of Christianity marked its transformation from a persecuted minority faith to the official religion of the Roman Empire. This new status brought with it profound changes, not only in theology, but also in how Jesus was visually represented, as Christianity became intertwined with imperial power. There was a growing desire to make Jesus relatable to the Roman elite artists. began to draw on Greco-Roman aesthetics, portraying Jesus with features that aligned with their ideals of beauty and divinity: fair skin, straight hair, and a commanding presence. This Romanization of Jesus served a dual purpose. It made the faith more palatable to a predominantly European audience and legitimized the political authority of Christian rulers. By depicting Jesus as someone who resembled the ruling classes, the Church reinforced its alignment with imperial power. This trend continued as Christianity spread further into Europe during the Middle Ages, with depictions of Jesus becoming increasingly Europeanized. The medieval period saw the consolidation of this image to religious art commissioned by European monarchs and the Church in these works. Jesus was often depicted as a figure of European nobility, with features that mirror those of the patrons or the artists themselves. These depictions were not necessarily acts of conscious erasure, but reflected the cultural norms and assumptions of the time for the people creating and viewing these images. A Jesus who looked like them felt more immediate and accessible. The Renaissance brought about another significant shift. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo created iconic depictions of Jesus that remain influential to this day, while their works brought new levels of realism and emotional depth. They also further entrenched the image of a white European Christ. These masterpieces were celebrated not just for their artistic merit, but also for their ability to project an idealized version of divinity that resonated with European audiences. In many ways, these images became the standard against which all others were measured, overshadowing the more historically grounded depictions from earlier traditions. The age of European exploration and colonization amplified the reach of this image as European powers expanded their influence across the globe. They brought with them their version of Christianity, complete with a white Jesus. This depiction became a tool of colonization used to assert the superiority of European culture and justify the subjugation of non-European peoples. Missionaries played a key role in this process, presenting a Europeanized Jesus as the universal savior, while erasing or marginalizing local expressions of Christianity. The impact of this white Jesus was particularly devastating in the context of the transatlantic slave trade. Slave owners and pro-slavery theologians use the image of a white Christ to justify the enslavement of African people, portraying whiteness as closer to godliness and blackness as a mark of inferiority. This distorted theology became a cornerstone of the racial hierarchies that shaped the Americas and continued to influence perceptions of race and faith. Today, even after the abolition of slavery, the image of a white Jesus persisted as a symbol of racial and cultural dominance in the United States. For example, depictions of a white Christ were used to reinforce segregation and the idea of white superiority. This version of Jesus became so deeply ingrained in Western Christianity that it was rarely questioned, even as it perpetuated harmful stereotypes and excluded non-European communities from fully seeing themselves reflected in their faith. Theological interpretations also played a role in cementing this image. European and American theologians often read their own cultural biases into the Bible, portraying Jesus in ways that aligned with their worldview. This entric lens shaped not only how Jesus was depicted, but also how his teachings were understood, often emphasizing themes of order and hierarchy over justice and liberation. Despite these distortions, the roots of a more diverse and inclusive understanding of Jesus have never been completely erased. In the 20th century, movements such as the Harlem Renaissance, the Civil Rights Movement, and liberation theology began to challenge the dominant narratives. Black theologians and artists reclaimed the image of a black Jesus as a source of empowerment and a reminder of his solidarity with the oppressed. These efforts sparked a broader conversation about representation, justice, and the true identity of Jesus, the Aurora of Jesus. African heritage was not merely an artistic or cultural choice. It was a deeply political act, with far-reaching consequences by aligning Jesus with whiteness. Powerful institutions used his image to reinforce systems of oppression and exclusion. Reclaiming the historical and cultural truth of Jesus' identity is not just about correcting historical inaccuracies. It is about confronting the legacies of these systems and creating a more just and inclusive vision of faith. The story of Jesus has reshaped through centuries of white-wishing, holds a mirror to the way history has been written and rewritten. By those in power, however, this transformation did not occur in a vacuum. It was deeply intertwined with the socio-political currents of the time, serving the agendas of empires and institutions. By examining this process, we uncover not only the erasure of Jesus' African heritage, but also the broader patterns of domination and exclusion that have shaped our world. The intertwining of Christianity with the Roman Empire marked a pivotal moment in this transformation, when Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire. The faith became a tool of statecraft to solidify this union. The image of Jesus was adapted to reflect the values and aesthetics of the empire. Roman artistic traditions emphasized symmetry, order, and a certain ideal of beauty that aligned with their concept of divinity. By depicting Jesus with these characteristics, the Church aligned his image with imperial authority, it making him a symbol of unity and power. This alignment with imperial ideals continued to evolve as Christianity spread across Europe in medieval art. Jesus was often depicted as a majestic king-like figure with golden halo and robes befitting a ruler. These images served not only to inspire devotion, but also to legitimize the authority of monarchs who claimed to rule by divine right. In this context, the whiteness of Jesus was not incidental. It was a reflection of the European worldview that equated divinity with their own cultural identity. The Renaissance amplified this trend with its focus on humanism and the rediscovery of Greco-Roman ideals. Artists like Michelangelo and Raphael drew inspiration from classical art, creating images of Jesus that emphasized physical perfection. According to European standards, these depictions, celebrated for their beauty and craftsmanship, became the definitive image of Christ for much of the Western world. Nonetheless, they also reinforced the notion that Jesus belonged to European culture, further marginalizing the diverse communities that had embraced Christianity. From its earliest days. The spread of European colonialism took this image to every corner of the globe. Missionaries, often working hand in hand with colonial powers, presented Christianity as a package deal, a faith intertwined with European culture, values, and aesthetics. In this context, the image of a white Jesus became a symbol of cultural superiority used to justify the colonization and conversion of non-European peoples. This process erased local expressions of Christianity and imposed the Eurocentric worldview that devalued the cultures and identities of colonized peoples. Was this more apparent than in the Americas? During the era of slavery, the image of a white Jesus was used to reinforce the ideology of white supremacy, poor in blackness, as incompatible with divinity and salvation. Slave owners co-opted Christianity to justify the dehumanization of African people, using distorted interpretations of Scripture to argue that slavery was part of God's plan. The whiteness of Jesus became a powerful tool in maintaining these systems of oppression, the embedding racial hierarchies into the fabric of the faith. Even after the abolition of slavery, the legacy of this distorted theology persisted in the Jim Crow era. White churches often clung to the image of a white Jesus as a way to uphold segregation and racial inequality. This version of Jesus was not just a religious figure, but a cultural icon that reinforced the status quo for many people of color. This created a painful disconnect between their faith and their lived experiences, making it difficult to see themselves fully represented in the story of salvation. Nevertheless, amid this history of exclusion and arur, there have always been voices pushing back the African American church. for example, has long been a space of resistance and reclamation through gospel music. Sermons and art, Black Christians have imagined Jesus in their own image, emphasizing his solidarity with the oppressed. This reclaiming of Jesus as a figure of liberation has been a powerful counter-narrative challenging the dominant image of a white Christ and offering a vision of faith rooted in justice and equality. The liberation theology movement further expanded this vision, connecting the story of Jesus to struggles for freedom and human dignity around the world. In Latin America, Africa, and beyond, theologians emphasize the ways in which Jesus' teachings resonate with the experiences of marginalized and oppressed communities. This perspective reframes the gospel as a message of empowerment, calling for systemic change, rather than passive acceptance of injustice. Reclaiming the image of a Black Jesus is not just about representation. It is about re-entering the voices and experiences that have been pushed to the margins by acknowledging Jesus' African heritage. We open the door to a more inclusive and authentic understanding of Christianity, one that celebrates its diverse roots and challenges the forces of exclusion that have shaped its history. This process also forces us to confront the ways in which power and privilege have influenced the interpretation of faith. It invites us to ask difficult questions about who has been excluded from the story of Christianity, and why these questions are not just academic. They have real implications for how we live out our faith today, shaping our understanding of community justice and the image of God. The story of Jesus as a man deeply connected to Africa is not a new narrative. It is a story that has been waiting to be reclaimed. It challenges us to move beyond the simplified Eurocentric portrayals that have dominated for so long, and to embrace a more complex, nuanced vision of who Jesus was. This is not about rewriting history. It is about recovering a truth that has been buried for centuries, a truth that has the power to transform how we see ourselves and each other. The reclamation of Jesus' African heritage is not only about addressing historical inaccuracies, but also about grappling with the profound implications of his identity in today's world. The image of a Black Jesus saint stands as a powerful symbol challenging entrenched systems of racial inequality and offering a more inclusive vision of faith. This reframing is deeply relevant in a world still wrestling with the legacies of colonialism, slavery, and systemic racism. For many people of African descent, rediscovering Jesus' African roots provides a profound sense of representation and belonging. By lying for centuries, the portrayal of Jesus as a white European figure has perpetuated the idea that divinity and whiteness are intrinsically linked. This has contributed to a broader societal narrative that devalues Blackness, embedding a sense of inferiority in the minds of generations. The image of a Black Jesus disrupts this narrative, affirming that African features, cultures, and histories are not just valid, but sacred. The significance of this representation extends beyond aesthetics or identity politics. It resonates on a deeply spiritual level, offering a vision of Jesus as someone who understands and embodies the struggles of marginalized communities for African Americans and other people of African descent. This reframing of Jesus provides a reminder that their experiences are not peripheral to the Christian story, they are central to it. This understanding can be profoundly healing, countering centuries of exclusion and offering a renewed sense of dignity and hope. The implications of this perspective are equally transformative for white Christians, acknowledging Jesus' African heritage challenge. As the Eurocentric lens through which much of Christianity has been interpreted, it invites believers to confront their own assumptions about race, culture, and divinity, opening the door to a more expansive and inclusive understanding of faith. This process can be uncomfortable, as it requires letting go of deeply ingrained biases and embracing a vision of Christianity that centers the voices and experiences of those historically marginalized. The image of a black Jesus also carries significant implications for the broader fight against systemic racism throughout history. Religious imagery has been used to reinforce racial hierarchies and justify oppression. Reclaiming the African identity of Jesus offers a powerful counter-narrative, challenging these systems at their core. It asserts that blackness is not a deviation from the divine image, but a reflection of it, affirming the inherent worth and dignity of black lives. This reframing of Jesus' identity also intersects with movements for racial justice in meaningful ways in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement. For example, the story of a black Jesus serves as a theological affirmation of the struggle for equality and justice. It connects the fight against racism to the teachings and example of Christ, emphasizing his solidarity with the oppressed and his call to challenge unjust systems. This perspective transforms the gospel from a message of passive acceptance into a call to action, urging believers to actively work toward a more just and equitable world. In addition to its impact on racial justice, the recognition of Jesus' African heritage has profound theological implications. It calls for a re-examination of core Christian doctrines, such as the Incarnation. Through a more inclusive lens, the idea of God becoming human takes on new depth when we consider that this humanity was embodied in a person deeply connected to Africa. It emphasizes the universal nature of Christ's mission, while grounding it in the lived experiences of marginalized communities. This perspective also challenges traditional associations of whiteness with purity, divinity, and moral authority. By presenting Jesus as a figure of African heritage, it disrupts these associations and affirms the sacredness of all racial and cultural identities. It calls believers to a deeper understanding of what it means to be made in the image of God, celebrating the diversity of humanity as a reflection of the divine. The cultural implications of this shift extend beyond theology and into the realms of education, media, and representation for too long. Religious education materials and popular media have perpetuated a narrow, Eurocentric vision of Christianity. Reclaiming the image of a black Jesus offers an opportunity to challenge these norms, creating spaces for more diverse and historically accurate representations of faith. This shift has the potential to transform how Christianity is taught, practiced, and understood, fostering a more inclusive and equitable vision of the faith. The recognition of Jesus' African heritage also opens up new possibilities for interfaith dialogue and cultural exchange by acknowledging the shared African and Middle Eastern roots of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. It highlights the interconnectedness of these traditions and creates opportunities for mutual understanding and collaboration. This perspective emphasizes the common humanity that underpins these faiths, offering a powerful counter to the divisive narratives that have often shaped their interactions. However, the process of reclaiming Jesus' African heritage is not without its challenges. For many, the image of a white Jesus is deeply ingrained, representing not only their faith but also their cultural identity. Confronting this legacy requires a willingness to engage in difficult conversations and to challenge long-held assumptions. It demands a commitment to truth and a recognition of the ways in which historical distortions have shaped our understanding of faith and identity. Despite these challenges, the potential benefits of this reframing are profound. By embracing the full complexity of Jesus' identity, we can create a vision of Christianity that is more inclusive, authentic, and transformative. It is a vision that celebrates diversity, affirms the dignity of all people, and calls believers to work for justice and reconciliation in their communities. And beyond, the story of Jesus, when understood in its full cultural and historical context, extends far beyond the boundaries of race and geography. It is a story that speaks to the shared humanity of all people, but one that has often been co-opted to exclude rather than unite the recognition of Jesus. African heritage invites us to see his life and teachings through a broader lens, one that prioritizes justice, inclusivity, and the interconnectedness of all human experiences. This interconnectedness is evident in the way Jesus' teachings resonate across cultural boundaries. His parables and sermons emphasize themes of community compassion and the inherent worth of every individual, values deeply rooted in African spiritual traditions. In many ways, the ethos of Jesus' message aligns with the African concept of Untold, which emphasizes the idea that I am because we are this worldview, which prioritizes communal harmony and collective well-being, mirrors the teachings of a man who sought to break down barriers and bring people together. Understanding Jesus within this framework challenges the individualistic interpretations of Christianity that have often dominated Western theology. It shifts the focus from personal salvation to a more communal vision of faith, one that calls for solidarity with the oppressed and a commitment to systemic change. This perspective not only enriches our understanding of Jesus' message, but also reclaims its radical call to justice and equality. The African roots of Jesus also remind us of the multicultural nature of early Christianity. The faith that emerged in the decades after Jesus' death was not a monolithic movement, but a dynamic, diverse community that spanned continents and cultures, from the Ethiopian eunuch baptized by Philip to the North African theologians who shaped early Christian thought. Africa has played a central role in the development of the faith. This history, often overshadowed by Eurocentric narrative, underscores the importance of reclaiming the African heritage of Jesus and the early church. One of the most striking examples of this heritage is found in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. Christianity was introduced to Ethiopia in the 4th century, and the faith has flourished there ever since. Ethiopian traditions offer a rich tapestry of beliefs, practices, and artistic expressions that reflect a deep connection to the life and teachings of Jesus, from the vibrant iconography depicting a black Christ to the centuries-old liturgy sung in G. The Ethiopian Church stands as a testament to the enduring legacy of Christianity's African roots. This legacy is not confined to Ethiopia. Across the African continent, Christianity has taken on diverse forms, blending with local traditions and creating expressions of faith that are both deeply rooted in history and uniquely African. These traditions challenge the notion that Christianity is a Western religion and highlight its adaptability and universality. They also provide a powerful counter-narrative to the colonial interpretations of Christianity that sought to erase African identities and cultures. The image of a black Jesus is a central part of this counter-narrative. It challenges the idea that divinity must conform to European standards and affirms the sacredness of African identities. This affirmation is particularly important in a world where racial inequality remains pervasive. The image of a black Jesus stands as a powerful symbol of resistance and empowerment, offering hope and inspiration to those who have been marginalized and oppressed. For many, this image also serves as a reminder of Jesus' solidarity with the marginalized. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus consistently aligns himself with those on the margins of society. The poor, the sick, the outcasts. His teachings emphasize the inherent worth of every individual, regardless of their social or economic status. In this light, the image of a black Jesus becomes not just a representation of historical truth, but also a reflection of the values he embodied: justice, compassion, and the dignity of all people. The reclamation of Jesus. African heritage is not about erasing other cultural interpretations of his life and teachings. Instead, it is about recovering a truth that has been obscured by centuries of whitewashing and exclusion. It is a call to expand our understanding of who Jesus was and what he represents. Embracing the diversity of human experience as a reflection of the divine, this perspective challenges us to move beyond the limitations of cultural stereotypes and to see Jesus as a figure who transcends boundaries, bringing people together in a shared vision of love and justice. In reclaiming this truth, we also confront the ways in which power and privilege have shaped the story of Jesus. The whitewashing of his image was not just an artistic choice, but a deliberate act of arrestor that served the interests of empires and institutions. By aligning Jesus with whiteness, these forces sought to legitimize systems of oppression and exclude those who did not fit their narrow vision of faith. Acknowledging this history is an essential step toward healing and reconciliation, both within the church and in society at large. The process of reclaiming Jesus' African heritage also invites us to reimagine the future of Christianity. It calls for a faith that is inclusive and equitable, one that honors its diverse roots and prioritizes the voices and experiences of those who have been historically marginalized. This vision is not just about representation. It is about creating a faith that is true to its origins and relevant to the challenges of the modern world. The journey toward this vision requires humility, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. It demands that we listen to the stories and perspectives that have been silenced, and that we commit ourselves to the work of justice and inclusion. This journey is not an easy one, but it is a necessary one, a journey that leads us closer to the heart of the gospel and the radical love it represents. The reclamation of Jesus' African heritage has profound implications for the way we approach not only faith, but also our understanding of history, identity, and justice. This process challenges deeply entrenched narratives that have shaped Western Christianity, and by extension, global culture, for centuries. It is not just a correction of his historical inaccuracies, but a call to reimagine the foundational stories that define our collective humanity.